set, hut.
As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sound of Golden Blue football.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10, the 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it.
He did it. Patrick White. Touchdown, Tay Von Austin.
The Don Nehlen's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread.
I think you think that these guys are going to fall over dead for you. Well, I got news for you. They're going to punch you right in the mouth. It's Mountaineer pride!
Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football. West Virginia football.
Leave no doubt tonight. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue. Not this night.
They've done it. They've done it. A perfect season. And the Mountaineers, for the first time in history, undefeated and untied.
Don Nehlen and his Mountaineers, for the second time, have finished a regular season with an unblemished mark.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another live stream here on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel, March 2nd edition. And actually, funny enough, this one is going to be up on Facebook as well, something that we haven't done in about, I guess, multiple years. I think it's been like 3 years since we put a live stream up on Facebook as well. We were trying to grow that YouTube audience up, but now that that YouTube audience has reached a really good point, I figured, hey, we can start throwing the live streams up on Facebook again as well, so probably try and do some of that. But if you happen to be tuned in on Facebook, be sure you come over to the CRW YouTube channel, give us a subscription there, because that's the only way you'll get the pre-recorded videos, our podcast episodes, and of course, if you become a channel member, the bonus content that you can get there as well is only found on the YouTube side. But figured we'd try and reach out to get some people in on the Facebook side as well for this one, and might try and do that moving forward for the live streams. But main topic, of course, first day in pads for West Virginia, first practice in pads yesterday, and Rich Rod provided an update following that. So watched that finally and took some notes, and going to share some of my thoughts on his press conference, and then towards the tail end talk a little bit about that unfortunate loss last night for West Virginia basketball, kind of one that, if you watch our last stream, we kind of predicted would be the case, with BYU just being a really bad matchup for this year's Mountaineer club, and BYU one of the hottest teams in the conference, if not the hottest team in the conference as well. But still 2 games left in the regular season for the Mountaineers, and I still feel very good about their NCAA tournament chances. So we'll talk about that towards the tail end of the stream. But before we get into my thoughts from Rich Rod's press conference, you guys over here on the YouTube side, if you would just do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button, give this video a like. You can do that whether you're watching this live with me, or if you're watching this after the fact on a playback. It'll still help out a ton, help this find more Mountaineer football fans like yourself. And if you are one of those that hasn't yet, be sure to subscribe here to the channel so you can stay up to date with all the happenings throughout the Mountaineer football program. We'll keep you up to date on the roster, the depth chart, recruiting, all of that good stuff as we push forward to the Rich Rod 2.0 era in 2025, as we get set to begin that already underway here with spring ball now, 3 days in the books, first day in the pads in the books. So we'll keep you up to date on all of that here on the Country Roads Webcast, and appreciate you guys for doing those things. If you're not getting to chat live, and throw your thoughts in the comments there, and I'll respond after the fact there as well. But let's talk a little bit about Rich Rod's press conference, what he had to address there, and kind of some of the updates. Like I said, first day in pads. Feels like they can teach and learn more now that they're in pads. They did go live for approximately about 10 minutes, so not a ton, but did get some live work in there in the first padded practice. He felt like there was too many periods of softness, and says they will get that fixed. And that's one thing that I love that he continues to point out, is just the fact that they're not really there to that hard edge mentality he wants them to have yet, not quite yet meeting his expectations of playing hard. And there's at least 3 or 4 times you'll hear me mention in here him talking about things that were happening that he terms soft, which is something that we've got to get weeded out of this program now, and get these guys more accustomed to this hard edge style of play that Rich Rod and his staff are bringing into the program, which we're really excited about. They need to learn to go full speed and not half speed when they're thudding. And of course, when they do go live, they are actually, fully tackling. But, he says they haven't really figured out when they're thudding that they still need to go full speed and not just half speed, even though it's a thud period. Then I was asked a little bit about the running backs, and this is a couple things that stood out to me here. One of these I'll put an asterisk on because I wanted to highlight it for sure. But Jaheim White, he called him proven, which I would agree with. You guys know that's my favorite player on the team, and I think that he can have a big year, and Rich Rod seems to agree with that. He stated that he thinks he'll have a great year and has a perfect skill set for what they do on offense, which is something that I've been saying since Rich Rod came in, that I felt super excited about what that could mean for Jaheim White moving forward. And then he was asked a little bit about some of the other running backs because they're kind of being evaluated right now as Jaheim's recovering from that banged up knee. But he stated, he likes to have 3 running backs that are, ready to roll from day one from the jump. And he feels like there's some talent in the room, but said that they may need to add another running back. And that's the comment there that I put an asterisk beside, because that's something that we're looking at post-spring is what movement is going to happen. Who else are we going to target in the transfer portal? We heard in his last press conference, Rich Rod talk a little bit about needing some more depth at receiver. So it sounds like not only does he feel like that at one of the skill positions, but at one of the others at running back as well. So I think probably following the spring, you can see us maybe bring in another receiver or two, and sounds like we're going to try and target and bring in another running back potentially as well to join that room over the summer before we get into fall camp. He was asked about the gap between his version of playing hard and the player's version of playing hard, because it was a few press conferences ago he mentioned that those two ideas had not quite meshed yet, his version of playing hard with the player's version of playing hard. And he said the gap between his version and their version is still, quote-unquote, pretty wide during the first day in pads. He said he saw moments where it was more, there than in the past, but reiterated that if you were soft, physically or mentally, you're not going to make it here. So it seems like they're still dealing with some of that, and that's what I'm saying. After spring, we're going to see some movement, whether some guys by choice, whether some guys that they tell, to hit the bricks because they're going to bring in somebody else that fits more in line with the culture. And then also, we got to keep in mind that it's going to be a 105 roster limit if that house settlement is approved in April, which we're all expecting it to be. Rich Rod has mentioned he's expecting it to be. So that's going to be some decisions of some players that have to be cut as well to get down to that new 105-player roster limit that will probably be implemented over the summer. I mentioned secondary play last year was not good in reference, to last season, which obviously we would all agree with, but that kind of made me smile a little bit because it seems like when he's watched it, a lot of that has stuck out to him. It was a few press conferences ago, we said when he was watching the Texas Tech game from last year, it made him nearly vomit and throw up, made him sick to his stomach. And of course, the secondary play, one of the worst secondaries in the country last year. But he said some of the guys that they have returning, they hope will improve, and they feel like a lot of the new guys that they brought in bring new competition to that room as they're trying to rebuild that secondary. He went on to talk a little bit more about, that softness aspect that we were touching on there earlier, stating if there's a moment of softness that you see from a player mentally or physically, you have to try and nip it in the bud and address it right then. And he said you have to address it every single time you see it. He said not 99% of the time, essentially saying, you can't let these things go by the wayside. You can't let, somebody playing soft and say, well, he'll do it better next play. He said, no, we're going to call it out right then and there. We're going to coach them up, say that's not meeting our standard, and we're going to do it 100% of the time so that these guys are playing hard up to our expectations. Down in, down out, play in, play out, series in, series out, game in, game out. They're doing what we want them to do and having that hard edge mentality, which is such a refreshing thing to hear because I do not believe that was the case in the past here at WVU. And so to get back to that type of mentality, I think is going to be very big, because if there's one thing you've heard me complain about over the past 2 coaching staffs, not only the most recent one, but the one prior to that, both of those guys were, quote unquote, from the air raid system. And I think that a lot of times there is a little bit of that that goes into that, at least from what we've experienced here at WVU and when we've seen it. That's not necessarily addressed. That hard edge has not been there, in my opinion. So glad to see all of this talk about weeding out softness throughout Rich Rod's press conference yesterday and throughout all the press conferences that he's had, really. So welcome sign for me. And then, just to kind of tell a story about that, because he was talking about there's always been an adage that if a dog doesn't bite when he's a puppy, he won't bite, when he's a full-grown dog. But he said he doesn't really buy into that, and he gave an example of why, and feels like you can coach players up and get that softness out of them and get them to the level that you want them to be at. He didn't name the name, but he told a story about a wide receiver that was here his first go-round at WVU that went from being, one of the softest players, couldn't get him to block, couldn't get him to do anything. I believe he termed it, super soft, to becoming the best stock blocking wide receiver he has ever coached, still to this day, and was a 3-year starter for him here at WVU. So feels like he can definitely, just because somebody's version of playing hard is not lining up with his right now, if they're appearing a little bit soft early on, doesn't mean that can't change over time. And he gave that example as to how he knows that it can and how he's experienced that change happen before with a player. So, that's something to look at. Just because he's saying these things doesn't mean that it can't improve and it won't improve, whether that be via attrition or via guys, jumping on board and doing what they're supposed to do and what he wants them to do and playing to the new standards that are here under Rich Rod in the West Virginia program. He mentioned the kickoff rules, hopes that they change them to the new NFL model, which you guys know me, I'm more of a college sports guy. I don't watch too much of the pros, so I haven't really seen that kickoff model too much. I know what it looks like, but I haven't really seen it in action. So I would be interesting to see if that comes to the college game, how that would affect things, how that would look. But he also mentioned that they were, I think number 2 in the conference last year at Jack State in kick returns. But he said, one reason is because they really fair catched a lot of the kickoffs. I think he said they had one that was nearly a 30-yard kickoff return and then didn't return too many more after that. So it sounds like as far as the return game, if we got some guys that he feels like can do it, he may let them go. But a lot of times we're probably going to be starting at the 25-yard line, which, not a bad thing to do, I think, because sometimes you try and bring those kicks out and you end up, pinned back on your 15, 20-yard line. You cost yourself 5 or 10 yards on a possession to start a series. So understand that strategy right there. But another thing that I put an asterisk beside was the fact, while we're talking about kickoffs, skipping down a little bit in my notes, but it relates because one thing that we all complained about last year and probably the past couple years is, why are we not just kicking the ball out of the end zone on kickoffs like every other team does? For some reason, we tried to outsmart people and have this strategy where we try and pin it in the corner of the end zone right there on the 1-yard line, and our kicker wasn't the best at it either, our kickoff specialist. So it either resulted in penalties or good field position for the opponent, and it was just extremely frustrating. And Rich Rod's strategy is, let's kick the thing out of the end zone. Crazy. So simple, but it works. And he said that's the reason, of course, they brought in Ethan Head out of Tulane, because it's important to have a guy that can kick it out of the end zone. And another thing right there that is refreshing to hear, kind of the polar opposite of what we experienced last season. So a lot of things, just a complete 180 for this program that I'm really excited about. And I think having a kicker that can potentially kick the ball out of the end zone will pay dividends for us in special teams as well. He said it's not a cause for concern right now with some of the things that he's complaining about in regards to the softness, because it's so early on, especially being the first practice in pads. He said, if it's something that he's still complaining about by, say, like practice 10, then that's when that will be a cause for concern that these players aren't, meeting the standard at that point. So still plenty of time to, get these guys coached up and get them to the level that they want them to be at. And then talked a little bit about the fake injuries that you see, happen. Teams utilizing tempo. They got a drive going. Guy gets the signal from the sideline. All of a sudden, he's catching a cramp or something, right? Falling down, slowing down the offense's momentum. And there's been rumors of the NCAA wanting to implement or penalties for fake injuries, which it's just kind of hard to determine how they're going to be able to do that. How are you going to tell what's a fake injury, what's a real injury? I guess unless you're able to literally spot it being signaled in from the sideline. But it's certainly something that Rich Rod is a proponent of. I think that he was saying, hey, if a guy fakes an injury, they should be able to not only be out for the rest of the series, but hold him out for the rest of the quarter or something. Give him that type of penalty, so then that would really deter people from it. And I think that's obviously because he has a lot of experience with that. He faces teams that do that a lot because of how fast the Rich Rod tempo is in his offense, how quick the offense moves with that no-huddle tempo. Used to have the Indy 3 different no-huddle tempos, one of which was extremely fast, and of course the old spot the ball saying comes from his utilization of tempo. So it's something that he's had to deal with a lot in the past, is people faking injuries against him to try and slow down his offense. So obviously he feels some type of way about that, and that's why he kind of is very much against that. As far as returns, he said they're not really working those in spring, not going live on kick returns anyways. They're working punt block, field goal block. But he was asked about who's back there kind of fielding them, and the 3 names that he mentioned sounded like he was, kind of forgetting some. I think he mentioned there was a defensive player that is back there as well. But the 3 names that he mentioned were Rodney Gallagher, Man Singleton, and Gerard Bowie, who have currently been back there working as the returners. And then the last thing that I've got jotted down in my notes here from his press conference is him talking about having something to prove. He said, sometimes he feels like, people get complacent, feel like, I don't have anything to prove. And he said he feels like that's kind of the polar opposite of the way that he feels, and he wants his players and coaches to feel, is that they always have something to prove. And his quote was, if they're keeping score, we have something to prove. And that's a mentality that I love, and just seems like each press conference that passes, Rich Rod just has me buying in more and more, throwing on those gold and blue tinted glasses more and more, and getting really excited about this upcoming season and about the upcoming era under Rich Rod as well, with some of the things that he's been saying. And I'm super excited and can't wait to see what this team looks like when we get to see them in person, not only for the spring showcase in just a little over a month, but of course, once we get to kind of the final incarnation of what this team's going to look like as they continue to build the roster after spring through the summer and when we get into fall camp. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun here with Rich Rod back at the helm. This team's going to play hard. This team's going to play fast. And those are a couple of things right there that we haven't seen in recent years here at WVU. So both of those things are very exciting, and another exciting press conference, if you were asking me, from Rich Rod there. But those were kind of some of my takeaways. I'm going to catch up on some of your all's comments here. Like I said, it won't be a long stream, won't keep you guys too long on this Sunday, but wanted to talk a little bit about the first day in practice, or first day in pads there in practice, as Rich Rod talked about it a little bit yesterday. And then, of course, I want to talk a little bit about the basketball game here before we wrap up, but I'll get to some of your all's comments. Before I do that, I'm going to take a swig of my coffee first, and then I will catch up on some of those. And you guys that are in here live, if you got any questions or anything, throw them in here in the chat. I'll try and touch up on some of those. If you're watching on a playback, you can throw them in the comments. I'll address them there in text form. But just one more reminder, if you are in here live, or even if you're watching this after the fact on that playback here on YouTube, hitting the thumbs up button, giving the video a like, helps us a ton with that YouTube algorithm. And be sure to subscribe here to the channel so you can stay up to date on the Mountaineer football news. But if you're someone that just can't get enough, you need that little bit extra. What's the difference between ordinary and extraordinary? It's that little bit extra, right, guys? And if you're someone that wants some extraordinary extra content there for you, you can get it by becoming a channel member here on the CRW YouTube channel. Just pop over. There should be a join button right in the video description. If you hit that for as low as a couple bucks a month, once the season comes around, you'll get player grades, you'll get snap counts after each game, injury reports, depth chart updates. Then if you go up to the top level there, become an Almost Heaven member, you'll also get film reviews. You'll get the monthly hangout streams, which we're going to have one of those coming here. The March one will be coming soon. I have that announcement for you Almost Heaven members here in the near future. And you also get WVU football helmet badges beside your name, custom emojis, priority in chat there, and also the pre-recorded videos. You get access to kind of behind the scenes looks at those. We usually record our pre-recorded videos with channel members in there live with us as we record, so not only do you kind of get to see how the sausage is made, but you also get early access to the video before it's edited and uploaded to the main channel there. So just something to note there, if you're someone that can't get enough WVU football content, helps keep this mic recording and that camera rolling. It's the catalyst to keep us going here at the CRW, and can never thank our channel members enough, so I always like to throw that in there and remind you guys of that as well. But I appreciate everyone that is in here live with me. Let me get to some of your all's comments here. James Weekly, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Matt Dix as well. And my boy JR in here. What's going on? It is a perfect day to talk West Virginia football, but that's always every day for me, in my opinion. A good question, Matt Dix. I could look that up and find out. I did see that they did win and move to 10-0, but I'm not really privy on the baseball schedule. Like I've talked about in the past, baseball not really my sport. I try and keep up with WVU now, as of a couple of years ago when things really started to pick up from them and they became a really good program. I try and at least keep up with the record and watch some highlights and stuff so I can talk about them briefly on these streams and at least give them shout outs as they're deserving of it, and they're deserving of it thus far this season. I believe 10-0 currently under a first-year coach there, Steve Sabins, who's taken over for Randy Mazey. So really excited about the start WVU baseball has gotten off to, and hope they continue that hot start. Next live stream will be at some point this week. James, not exactly sure on the date yet. I'd have to see probably the practice schedule, or if any news comes out in the meantime and in between time. I know we're waiting to see another coach to join the West Virginia staff now that Chad Scott's departed. I'm expecting that news to come out in the near future. Whatever happens first, whether it's a WVU football practice or that news, that'll probably be around the time the next stream happens. But usually about every other day, every couple of days, James. We'll try and give one to you guys here to keep you guys up to date on everything that's going on. Let's see. Eric Flower says, last night was the first time I ever turned off a WVU game. Understandable, man. I think BYU's a terrible matchup for us. I know some people didn't like the way the officiating went, and I understand that as well, but I've kind of come to expect that from Big 12 refs. They're just basically atrocious. So, I personally didn't get to finish watching it because I fell asleep around halftime, but nonetheless, missed the second half, so I guess I watched the better half for WVU's purposes. But, as the bad thing when you watch the West Virginia basketball team is they play such good defense, but the offensive scoring droughts frustrate you so much. And as we went through that first half, I just knew, man, we're playing such good defense on a BYU team that averages 80 points per game. We're not going to be able to hold them like this in the second half. And if we're not able to build a lead and score offensively when we're playing that good defense, I just had that feeling, and we're just kind of waiting on the other shoe to drop because you knew BYU was going to start hitting their shots sooner or later for sure. Yeah, man, I am hype about that Jaheim news. That's what I talked about in the last stream, JR. I don't know if you had a chance to pop into that one or not, but since I've had a chance to talk to Jaheim personally myself, and since some of Rich Rod's comments, both in this press conference and the previous press conference, I'm leaning more towards, I think Jaheim White is going to stick around and be a part of this team for 2025, which is amazing news for us. Previously I was about 50-50. Now I'd say I'm probably about 65 him staying versus 35 him going. So I think it's a good chance him staying. And I certainly am hyped about that one, JR. That's my dude. So, not only now I can call him friend of the show now that I've had the chance to talk to him personally as well. Not only was he my favorite player before that, but having talked to him personally, a really good guy to go as well. Yeah, the running back coach is what I'm talking about there, Matt, that we're going to be bringing in here in the near future. Hopefully, I think Rich Rod said, he was hoping to get that done within a couple of weeks or so. So if we're looking at that timeline, sometime within the next week, hopefully we will get someone on board to fill that void at the running back coach position for sure. What's going on, Kenny? What's going on, man? Good to see you as always. WVU Mountaineer with Kenny popping in. Hey, Big Dan T, channel member here, so you guys can see beside Big Dan T there in the chat, if you're on the YouTube side, the nice WVU football helmet that channel members get access to there. He says the kickoffs is about the only thing I disagree with him on. Hate the NFL kick rules. I think a lot of people have said that, but why is that, Big Dan T? Is it because there's more touchbacks, or is it just because they're less exciting now? Like I said, I don't really watch too much pro sports myself, so I don't really have an opinion on it one way or the other. I know it came from the XFL or whatever, and the NFL adapted it. I think last season was the first year, right? But like I said, I don't know why people dislike it, because like I said, I haven't really seen it in action too much myself. But let me know what the reason is, Big Dan T. If you throw it in there for me, I'll try and pull that up in a second. Yeah, Matt Dix, I don't know. I don't think that it's the fact that we couldn't find one. I think it's more that the previous coaching staff had a weird strategy about kickoffs. Because if you look at Michael Hayes that we brought in, when he was at his previous place there at Georgia State, he was kicking I think it was almost 90% of kickoffs out of the end zone. He had one of the higher touchback rates of kickoff specialists before he came to WVU. So I think it's not that we couldn't find one. It was that our previous coaching staff had this weird strategy that they thought they could gain yardage and field position by, having a high arcing kick and trying to place it in certain spots. And that wasn't Michael Hayes' strength. So obviously when you're asking him to do something he's not good at, it's probably not going to work out well. And it didn't work out well for us in that aspect. And you can look at different areas of the team where they tried to put square peg in a round hole, and it ended up costing us. And I think kickoff specialist was one of those aspects as well. Let's see, where else we got here? Talking a little bit about basketball here. Yeah, I saw that. BYU does have the number one recruit in the nation coming in for next year. That was super surprising to me. I didn't expect that, but I think BYU's new coach must be, a really good one, not only because how well they're doing this season. Like I said, one of the hottest teams in the Big 12, 20 plus wins now. I think they're up to 12 or 13 conference wins in his first year. And then now they have the number one recruit coming in. So hopefully BYU's able to keep that guy, because it seems like he's doing some really good things for them. James Weekly said he also cut the game off. It was the second time he ever did that. I understand, man. It was a rough second half for WVU. So, yeah, good point there as well. We also tried to play Rodney Gallagher at cornerback, and then eventually ended up switching him back to his position where he excelled at wide receiver. And later in the season, we saw him, play a lot better when he was only playing on the offensive side. So yeah, it's another great example of square peg round hole type deal there. Eric Flower says, Rich Rod said it's the most dangerous play of the game. Isn't worth a kid ruining his career, and 80% of kickoffs aren't returned anyway. Exactly. I think that's another reason why he mentioned, they're not going live kick returns at all throughout the spring, and seems like a lot of ours are going to be fair catches and touchbacks to start on the 25, which, that's fine. If he wants to have that strategy, I'm cool with, because we know Rich Rod's offense is going to be explosive and special anyways, so that's fine. That's fine with me. Hey, what's going on? Another channel member, Trey Edwards, popping in. Good to see you also there, Trey, for sure. But I see you guys talking a little bit about basketball. So now that I've shared my thoughts on the first day in practice there, or first day in pads. I keep saying first day in practice, but first day in pads in practice there for the spring, and sharing my thoughts on some of Rich Rod's press conference. You guys got any other questions, comments, throw them in. I'll try and touch up on them one more time before we move on here and wrap up the stream. But let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about that basketball game. As unfortunate as the result was, do want to do a little recap of that and talk about the final 2 games of the season for the WVU basketball club. 17-12 now, 8-10 in conference. BYU, of course, with the big win there after a strong second half, where it was more in line with kind of the BYU we expected to see. West Virginia did a good job defending them in the first half, but you just knew BYU has a lot of weapons on offense, and eventually they were going to take off, and West Virginia, was going to have to really have a top-notch offensive game to try and keep up with BYU's scoring rate, and it just didn't happen, unfortunately, in that contest, and that's why you get the 77-56 BYU win at the end. Of course, you can throw in some other complaints as well, but I think with as bad as West Virginia was playing offensively, it really wouldn't have mattered if the officiating was a little bit better, in my opinion, because West Virginia couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and it's just so completely opposite of the previous game, where it seemed like things had finally came around. We were getting the open looks that we had been getting all season, as one of my pictures falls there behind me. Sorry about that. If you guys heard that loud bang, that's all that was. But, we'd been getting open looks in recent games and hadn't been hitting them. And then the last game seemed like we finally did knock down some of those shots. And so I thought, okay, maybe we're going to start hitting these. And then this game kind of right back to where it had been prior to that. And I mentioned in my preview of this game, the thing that West Virginia hung their hat on all year has been defense, but the scoring droughts had really hurt us, and it came back to bite us again. And as I mentioned in the preview as well, BYU's length was going to be an issue, and it was an issue. And unfortunately, Trey Ore was an issue again for West Virginia. The Mountaineers just really didn't have anybody that's big or strong enough to guard him. Plus, you had our big men in foul trouble. It was just a recipe for disaster. So another big game for Traore, much like the one he had against West Virginia last season. Ends up with another double-double. But let's look at some of the numbers that led to this loss for West Virginia. And you can see right off the bat here what I'm talking about with the scoring discrepancy. BYU hits nearly 53% of their shots. West Virginia all the way down at 33%. It's hard to win many basketball games shooting 33% from the field, and below 30% at the three-point line as well. BYU didn't even shoot the best at the three-point line either, but all 5 of those threes I do believe came in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. I think BYU was 0-4, 0-5 in the first half. Free throw discrepancy obviously was there, but both teams shooting a similar percentage, 64 for BYU, 60 for the Mountaineers. And here's where I'm talking about that length difference that really hurt us in this game, and the BYU big man that hurt us in this game. You see him out-rebound us by 11. And despite West Virginia's lack of size this season, in most games they've been right around even, or even sometimes had an advantage in the rebounding category. And when they have been out-rebounded by a large margin like this, it has been the games in which they have, usually fell by a wide margin, like we saw in this one against BYU. Ball movement, not the best for West Virginia last night either. That is something I noticed. Like I said, I fell asleep a little bit once the second half started, and didn't get to watch most of the second half. But even in the first half, it seemed like a really stagnant offense for West Virginia. Not a lot of people moving around, a lot of people watching Javon Small try and get things done, just not a ton of ball movement. And even when we did get that ball movement, we were missing the open look. And you can see that kind of in the assist differential here. 16 for BYU versus only 9 for the Mountaineers, but WVU did have 6 steals, and BYU only with 1. WVU only 4 turnovers in the game. Both teams really did a good job taking care of the basketball. 7 for BYU. You see that low turnover number for West Virginia. That's typically, when West Virginia has a good game. So that just shows you how stagnant the offense was, that it wasn't, you're turning the ball over, but you're just missing shots. 4 turnovers and you only end up with 56 points. That shows you kind of how the scoring droughts were present throughout this contest. Points in the paint. Yet again, what I was worried about in this game with the matchup with BYU's length, with their big men hurting us, that shows you right there just how much West Virginia was dominated in the paint. 46-22. There was a big foul discrepancy, as a lot of people have discussed, as West Virginia was called for 22 fouls versus BYU's 12, and BYU did have a 30-point lead at one point. So pretty much complete domination in the second half for BYU, for being honest, and they're just a really hot team in college basketball right now, and West Virginia has to find a way to right the ship there in these final two games, and I think they have some good matchups to be able to do that. We'll pull up the schedule momentarily and talk a little bit about that. As you see, for West Virginia, it's going to be hard to win games when Javon Small is your only double-figure scorer, and when Javon Small is below his season average. Had to take 14 shots to get his 15 points in this one. One of the first times this season that I haven't seen him snag any rebounds or any steals either. So, I don't want to say it's a bad game for Javon Small because I don't really think that he has too many bad games, but more of an uncharacteristic game for Javon Small compared to what we've been used to throughout this season. He's had one of the best seasons in the Big 12 and, around the nation really altogether. But he really does need, a secondary option. That's one thing that's hurt West Virginia this year following the injury to Tucker DeVries, which I think would have really completely changed things for this team. And I think we'd be talking about a team with 20-plus wins right now already if Tucker DeVries was around. But when you don't have another guy that's scoring consistently, it's really hard for West Virginia, because if Javon Small's, having an off night, then you can kind of forget about it with this team. As you see, no other scorer in double figures for the Mountaineers, and just really struggling from the field. Monty Hansberry, 30% from the field, 25% from the three-point line. Sincere Harris, 3 of 6 from the field. Jonathan Powell, 2 of 6, 1 of 3 on threes. We mentioned Javon Small having one of his worst shooting nights. I saw some of you guys in the comments talking about Toby O'Connie having a rough night, and he indeed did, 2 of 9 from the field. At least he knocked down a three-point attempt. 0 of 2 from the free throw line. His free throw struggles continue this season. I believe he's under 50% on the season from the free throw stripe, which is just baffling to me. And then essentially no scoring off the bench, at least not like we usually get. We did end up with 9 from Yesufu, which is good, and he has been our go-to bench scorer this season, so you do got to give him the credit that he deserves. But still 3 of 9 from the field, not his typical performance. And same goes for KJ Tenner, who went 1 of 5 from the field. And I didn't see someone point this out on Twitter that may not be a bad idea. If the rest of our offense is going to be this stagnant and no one's going to be hitting shots to where you got your other guards outside of Javon Small going 1 of 5, 3 of 9, 3 of 6, 2 of 6, and then O'Connie going 2 of 9 from the field, why not give Jake Auer 5 to 10 minutes per game? I know that he's probably going to be a little bit of a liability on defense when he's in there, especially as much man-to-man as we play. That's pretty much all that we play. You may have to really dedicate some help defense to whoever he's guarding. But if he can come in and play 5 to 10 minutes and get, 2 threes in for us, that's going to help, because every time the guy's on the court, he's knocking down a 3-point shot. He's probably, as far as it's concerned, percentage wise, I'd say he's the best 3-point shooter on the team and the minimal action that he's gotten. So I wouldn't be opposed to giving Jake Auer 5 to 10 minutes per game to at least have someone that can maybe provide you with, 3, 6, 9 points while he's in there, because he can knock down some 3-point shots. And when your offense has been as stagnant as ours has, you got to do every little thing that you can to help it out there. And then as we look at BYU, just a kind of complete difference as far as their guys scoring. They had 1, 2, 3 guys in double figures, and Traore off the bench just saves his best for West Virginia. Had a big game against us last year, and now a big game in this one, 20 points and 10 rebounds. And like I said, he's just so much bigger than anyone we had on the roster, especially, I know he's only 6'6", but when you look at his body frame compared to that of Ed Andre and Amani Hansberry, it's a night and day difference, and he was getting deep in the paint when he even caught the ball, and when you're catching that ball deep in the paint, there's really nothing you can do at that point. Just an easy 2 points for Traore, who was also getting some foul calls while he was down there, but he really hurt us in this game. And of course, Demon, who's been a really good player for BYU, with another good game, as is Richie Saunders. But when West Virginia was playing good in the first half, I was thinking that we may have a shot at this one. But when you don't go and score, and you go on those scoring droughts when your defense is playing well, you just knew the second half was probably not going to work out the way that you wanted. So let's pull up the schedule. We got 2 games left in the regular season. And then let's pull up the latest bracketology from Joe Lenardi, and let's see if CBS has updated theirs as well here. Let me pull up Joe Lenardi's here, because luckily for us, even after yesterday's loss, Joe Lenardi still appears to have West Virginia solidly in the field. I believe we're not even on the graphic currently. Yeah, still not even on the bubble graphic as I look at Joe Lenardi's here. I mean, no reason for me to pull this up and show you guys because we're not listed on it. So securely in the field. I believe the last update he showed, he gave us a 90% chance to make the tournament. So still feel pretty solidly about that thus far. I need to pull up the CBS bracketology as well, see if it's been updated. But let's take a look at our schedule here because I think we do have, we mentioned we probably wanted to split these 2 road games and win one of them. I felt like the most likely one that we would win would be this one coming up on Tuesday against Utah. So hopefully we're able to do that. And funny enough, if you guys haven't noticed yet, we'll be facing, our coach from last year, Josh Eilert, which, I'm not trying to knock on Josh Eilert, but his, coaching record is 9 wins and 23 losses. So it is a road game. It's not a gimme, but it's a game that we could and, in my opinion, should win. That would put us 18 wins and then come back home to finish the season against UCF, another game you're probably going to be favored in. West Virginia has a chance to win both of these games, and I kind of hope that they do because at that point, if you find a way to win both of these, I think you're pretty much locked into the NCAA tournament without having to win a Big 12 tournament game. If you're not able to beat, both of these teams, you might need a Big 12 tournament win to feel 100% secure, but I think West Virginia will be going dancing, and personally, I think there's a good chance they win both of these games. I'll talk more about the upcoming game against Utah on a stream, probably try and do that tomorrow or maybe Tuesday prior to the game and give my prediction and preview for that game, but just kind of my overall thoughts there on the final 2 regular season games. They are better matchups for West Virginia than some of the other in the more recent games, particularly BYU, who I think is a really bad matchup for West Virginia. I think we match up better with Utah, even though it's on the road, and then UCF is a team that we should beat. So that's kind of what we have left as far as the regular season schedule is concerned. Let's see if we can got any updates on the CBS bracketology here, as we just did one there for the ESPN. It looks like CBS has updated theirs. So let me pull this up really quick, showcase this, and then I will catch up with some of y'all's comments before we wrap up this stream here, March 2nd edition. But this is the CBS bracketology. Jerry Palm here doing this one. Joe Lenardi has us securely in the field. Let's see what Jerry Palm is talking about here. So we're not on the last 4 in or first 4 out. That's good. We're solidified in the field here in Jerry Palmer's bracketology as well. He has us as a 10 seed where we would meet 7 seed UCLA, be playing in Cleveland. Florida would be the 2 seed that we would potentially match up with in the second round. And, as I've stated on previous streams here and I put out on social media, I'm not mad about a potential 10 seed. I would rather have the 10 than the 8 or 9. Personally, that's just me. I don't like that 8-9 draw in the NCAA tournament. I think that the 10 seed is a little bit better, but it is what it is. I know that's weird to say because it's a lower seed, right? But when you watch the tournament, you kind of understand what I'm talking about. They're having to meet the 1 seed in the second round, especially if you could get matched up depending on which 1 seed that it is. But that's kind of how CBS has us now. So it seems like between both CBS and ESPN, as both of these have been updated since our loss to BYU, even with that loss, still seems like they have us solidly in the field. So fingers crossed, barring a major collapse in these final 2 regular season games, West Virginia seems like they should be dancing and in the tournament. So there's the basketball side of the update. Of course, the main topic was football as they have their first day in pads. Said it right that time, finally. And we got a little bit of an update from Rich Rodham. Was able to share my thoughts on some of those. But let's catch up on some of your alls here, and then we will wrap this one up. Let's see if I can see where I left off at in the chat here. Has White made any streams? I guess you're talking about Jaheim there, James. He's made some posts since his thing, but he's never been on the show, but I have, talked to him personally, through social media and such. He actually mentioned in the last stream after I did the show, when Chad Scott left, he reached out to me on X and said, he really enjoyed the show and appreciated the support, and I've kind of talked to him a little bit since then. So really nice guy, and it was pretty cool and pretty surreal for me. As you guys know, I've been my favorite player since we first recruited him, so to finally get to know and chat with him a little bit was really cool. Yeah, WVU, it would be nice. I think that we got a chance, to win both those games. Like I said, they are better matchups, and I would love to see us get a decent seed. If we were able to win both those and maybe win a game or two in the tourney, Big 12 tourney, that could climb us up. But the thing is, I don't want to climb up and get to the 8 or 9. If we're going to climb up, I'd like to see us get to the 6 or 7, because like I said, I like that 7 or 10 more than the 8 or 9. So we'll see what happens. As Matt agrees here, that 8 or 9 is a death trap. Exactly. I don't want that 8 or 9 if we can avoid it. But hey, beggars can't be choosers. I'm just going to be very happy to see WVU back in the big dance, though, if I'm being honest. That's just kind of what first world problems, as they call it, right? Let's see here. Yeah, Small had a bad game, but it's what his team does. Small had 2 assists last night because they couldn't shoot. Usually it's 5 to 9 assists per game. Exactly. That's something that stood out there in the box score as well. It's not a ton of assists. And like I said, when I was watching the game, it seemed like a lot of guys just standing around watching in that first half, and, not a recipe for success. You need Javon Small driving and dishing. You need Yesufu hitting some outside shots, Jonathan Powell hitting some outside shots when that defense collapses on Javon, and he needs to have those, 5 to 9 assists per game, because we need that secondary score to really complement him. And it was just a bad night overall for West Virginia when you look at any aspect, really. Your best player having an off game, your secondary options having bad nights as well, not getting the calls from the officials, getting dominated in the paint, getting dominated in the rebounding. Really the only bright spot that I could look out there was West Virginia took care of the basketball, at least didn't have a ton of turnovers. So Trey Edwards says, I knew it was over when I turned on the radio, and the first thing I heard was Javon shoots and no foul called. I didn't get the chance to listen to the radio broadcast. A lot of these games this season, I've been at work, so I've had to listen rather than watch. And, man, that's one thing that I do get tickled about when I hear the games is that Tony and Brad, man, they will let you know if the game's being officiated poorly, and, you can tell that it kind of affects them too, and they're a little bit emotional about it at times as well, which is great. I love that aspect of them and their calls. Of course, both their broadcasts always beats the TV announcers any day of the week and twice on Sunday, right? Matt Dix says, if WVU had DeVries and Stone, we would have Hansberry more open, and with those two, Hansberry would be a force, and Harris would get his steals, and make inside would be a force as well. Yeah, 100%, because that would, just think of how much more space the offense would have if you had just one of those two, DeVries or Stone. They couldn't really just focus on Javon. They couldn't key on him. They couldn't double him like teams have done, because then Tucker would absolutely eat you alive. And just the few games we got to see those two guys play together were special. We were 6-2, wins over, top teams in the country. And there's always going to be a story of what could have been if we could have got Javon Small and Tucker DeVries together for a whole season. But hopefully we're able to, repeat that success with, the 3 McDonald's All-Americans we've got coming in for next season, and who knows what moves we make in the transfer portal. So I think that, just the tip of the iceberg of what this team can be under Darren DeVries, the fact that they're making the big dance despite the injuries and all the adversity they've had to face really says a lot about the type of coach that he is, for sure. Trey says Tony and Brad was complaining the whole night about the officiating, and that goes kind of hand in hand with what I was talking about right there with them. I could only imagine some of the stuff that they were saying, because some of the calls or no calls were a little rough, not only for us but for BYU at times as well. I think Big 12 officials are just abysmal in general, personally, but bad officiating as Matt Dix calls out here as well, for sure. The only player that plays both football and basketball is Aiden Nelson, Kenny, and I don't think he's gotten in any basketball games, but he is back on the roster now. I don't think I've seen him get any play, but I know he did join the team at one point, and I'm guessing he's still there until the season wraps up, and then he'll probably come back to the football side. But we'll see what happens there. But, yeah, that's the only one that we have, and he's the first one in quite some time, I think, probably since Jarrett Brown. I know Jimmy Bell ended up trying some football after basketball, but I don't think he did both simultaneously. I think Jarrett Brown was the last one, and now Aiden Nelson the first kind of since then, for sure. Lose to Utah and kill UCF and drop to about a 10 seed. Yeah, I think that, if we split those games, we're probably going to still be sitting on that 10 seed line. If we win both of those and, get into the Big 12 tournament and win a game, then maybe we could climb. But it'll be interesting to see how the seeding shakes out, because, there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's with the bracketology, that's one thing that you got to keep in mind is, they're projecting this now, but once we get into conference tournament and you have some people that steal some bids, some teams that probably weren't going to make the tournament, but they go and win the conference championship, then they're in the field automatically. that changes up the seeding as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out, but I'm excited to cover it and get to see, West Virginia revealed in a bracket again. It's been a couple of years since we've had a chance to do a stream revealing West Virginia's brackets seed, so be excited to get the chance to do that again. Fingers crossed it happens. Feeling pretty confident about it at this point, though, for sure. I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't be mad at an 11 seed. Like I said, just happy to be in the field. 6-11 upsets happen all the time. And then, facing the 3 is better than facing a 2 or a 1, depending on what the matchup is, for sure. Kenny says he feels like we need to get both games left to go to the tournament. Yeah, I could see that, Kenny, but I think just one would probably get us there because of how well we've done, how many quad 1 wins we have. And really, it's more so just kind of how weak the bubble is in general this year. Like the other teams on the bubble, when you compare their resume to West Virginia's, ours is just kind of head and shoulders above because of some of the big wins that we've had against some of the top-ranked teams in college basketball this year. I think that's why Joe Lenardi has us solidly in the field, still kind of a lock despite the loss last night, is just because our resume versus the other teams on the bubble is pretty good. So I think one more win would get us in, but if you get both, then you're definitely a lock. But I think one would get us in for sure. Let's see. I saw that, Eric, $2 tickets for the game at Utah. I'm guessing that's maybe because not a lot of people invested in the Utah program now following the coaching change, an interim guy at the helm here to end the season, which is kind of weird the way that happened. They had won some big games and then all of a sudden letting their coach go. And just how ironic is it, that Josh Eilert's their interim coach and faces WVU. It's just such a weird story, man. That guy's been through so much in the past couple of years. It's crazy. It's crazy for sure. Let's see. Many 8 or 9 seeds made it to the Final Four in the last 30 years. Or not very many, Kenny says. Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, those upsets of 8 or 9 over 1 seeds do happen, but they are very, very rare. Whereas, a 7 or a 10 upsetting a 2 seed in the second round happens far more often, which kind of is one of the reasons why I say I prefer that 10 seed versus that 8 or 9 for sure. But it has happened. It has happened. Yeah, as Matt Dick says, not many, but it has happened. I think, was George Mason an 8 seed when they made it back in, what was that, 06? That was one of my favorite NCAA tournament runs, was when George Mason made it. Because you guys know, you guys that are longtime followers of the channel, I grew up Statesville, North Carolina, so I follow UNC. It's kind of my primary basketball team, and they beat UNC that year in the tournament, and once UNC got knocked out by them, I'm like, well, they beat my team. I guess I'm going to follow George Mason. I even have somewhere in storage here a George Mason Final Four shirt because I bought one because that was the first time I'd ever seen a Cinderella run like that reach the Final Four. I think I was in was I freshman in high school or something like that when that happened? I know it was way back when. It was like 20 years ago, so some of you guys may not even remember that. But yeah, that was a cool one. I think they may have been an 8 seed or a 9 seed. And then recently we've had a lot of lower seeds make it. Was it Loyola Chicago a couple of years ago? It's been happening more recently. It seems like there's been more upsets in recent years and more teams making long runs than lately. But that's the fun of the tournament. That's why I can't wait for March Madness. Glad to see that we're in March now and we're not too far away because that's one of the most exciting times of the year is March Madness for sure. Let's see. Any other questions here? 10 seed, okay. I knew it was somewhere in there. George Mason was a 10 seed according to Matt Dix. I knew there was a lower one for sure. I did too, man. I did too. That was a really fun team to watch. And, Jim Larinaga was a heck of a coach from then on. It's funny. He literally just retired. Was it this year or last year? So, he really, kind of rose up from that George Mason team, went on, coached a lot of good teams after that. But, yeah, that was a fun team to watch for sure. Or 11 seed. Yep, that's right. That rings a bell. 11 seed. That's what it was. Yep, Matt, you got that. Let's see. Yeah, Wyatt at the Combine doing some good things. Him and Sean Martin both with pretty good performances at the Combine. Sean Martin's run in the 40-yard dash should do him well there. It's good speed there for someone that's probably going to play defensive tackle. And then, Wyatt Milam, I'm hoping to be, a first rounder, early second rounder. I was surprised, though. It seems like a lot of teams are going to move him, and he's probably going to be an interior offensive lineman in the NFL versus, where he played tackle throughout his career here. But he's going to be a force in the NFL just like Zach Frazier is. So excited to see where Wyatt Milam ends up and stuff. So that's something to keep an eye on, too. NFL Combine going on, NFL Draft coming up, and hopefully we'll have some Mountaineers selected in that. Wyatt Milam certainly will be one for sure. So. But that's pretty much all I had, guys. wanted to just touch on, Rich Rod's press conference, kind of share my thoughts from it, some interesting tidbits that came out from that press conference. Hopefully you guys that hopped in here late will get a chance to go back and rewatch this from the beginning. Or if you're watching on a playback, though, appreciate that as well. No, not everybody can hop in and join live, but did have good turnout for people that did hop in live. And if you are on the Facebook, like I said, we'll try and put some of these live streams up on the Country Roads West webcast Facebook as well moving forward. Now, be sure you hop over to the YouTube channel and are subscribed here so that you get the pre-recorded videos, podcast episodes, and the extra members only content. If you want to join as a channel member as well, you can only get that on the YouTube side of things. But those of you guys that are watching on YouTube, before you head out, hit that thumbs up button. It'll help us a ton, and be sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you didn't get a chance to chat live, throw your thoughts in the comments. I'll try and respond there. Always appreciate those interactions as we continue to try and grow the CRW community through Mountaineer Nation. Like I said, I'll be back with the live stream either tomorrow or Tuesday. Got the Utah basketball game to preview, and hopefully we'll have some more other news to talk about as well, but we will at least have that to cover. So be on the lookout for a stream tomorrow or Tuesday. We'll let you guys know on the social media in the near future when it will be, but I appreciate you guys that hopped in here and chatted live with me. I always appreciate you guys that are channel members as well. Like I said, you help keep this mic recording, that camera rolling. You're the catalyst that keeps it all going, and I always appreciate you guys. And we'll have news out on the Almost Heaven Members Hangout stream. That'll be coming in the near future, probably sometime this week or next weekend. One of the two, we will get that going for you guys. But I appreciate you guys as always. Look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Hope everybody has a great Sunday. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.